What is your freedom worth to you? Each of our guests had a light bulb moment. They longed to live rather than merely exist. They smashed through their fears and programmed minds, trusting themselves, their faith, and their survival instincts, leaving the guilt, fear, oppression, and drudgery of their past for a brighter future. They took a brave and courageous step into freedom. This is their story of how they got a life. Welcome to Get a Life Podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Coming up in part 2 of Pip and Neville's podcast.
Yeah. So they know when the cookie's really crumbling. But they wanted to know all her sexual activity before marriage up to that date. At 2 o'clock in the morning, they were still there getting turned on by all this crap.
I hope every insider that reads this book realizes what a hellhole they are in, treating people like that. To me, that is the lowest point of abuse that you can give is somebody who is disabled, and then you're doing what you like. It's just horrific, absolutely horrific.
That's what the bullies do.
Yeah,
they pick on the weak and the vulnerable.
Yeah,
and that's what Hales are doing. I thought that's so sad. That's the potential of the whole church in those young teenagers, and all they're being taught to do is to drink whiskey, because they're not allowed to do anything else. The street just filled with cars racing and tyres squealing up to us, confronting us. And he said there's 3 or 4 or 5 officers standing on the footpath doing surveillance on this house. And he said, so we got in our cars and we drove away. And I said to him, what? You're the police and you buckled to these criminals? And he said, we feared mass violence. So I said, tell me what's causing it. And I couldn't believe what he said. Oh, he said, it's these jolly breaks when 20 people walk in and she's got to do all the meals and the catering. And he just flew off about the breaks. I said, well, you know where you start? You don't have any more visitors. The Priestley area really is a huge one. We all know that. I mean, I got a call from a young woman in Christchurch, and she said, I'm being visited without my husband because he's staying in, but I'm not sure what to do, so I'm on my own. She said, and I've got these perverted little beggars round in my home at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to find out my sexual activities to date.
What?
I mean, you couldn't read about it. So I know who the little beggar was, so I wrote him a letter, found out his address, and told him if he ever visited that home again, I was going to come round to his home and deal with him. She never, ever got another visit.
Wow.
Yeah. So they know when the cookie's really crumbling. But they wanted to know all her sexual activity before marriage up to that date. At 2 o'clock in the morning, they were still there getting turned on by all this crap. They are just evil to the core. And the person that we just had through the sound lost the 8 children and he's $500,000. He attended a priestly meeting for his son where he had got a little bit too friendly with a young lady in a haystack or something. And they wanted to know all the sexual positions that they used. And he was so disgusted, he just got up and walked out. I said, you shouldn't have done that. You should have picked up your son and taken him out and given the other 2 a good boot in the backside. I said, that is totally off the charts. Then I talked to somebody in Sydney, one of the gauges, when he was a priest, and he said they did exactly the same thing. They got a young couple and they screwed every position that they used out of them in detail. And then 2 of the priests went to the same home to sleep that night. The person that told me didn't. He went to his own home. But the 2 priests, one of them might have been living out of town, so he stayed in. And in the morning, one priest said to the other priest, what? And their wives were there. He said, the noise coming out of your bedroom last night, what? Did you have an argument or something? He said, no. He said, we were trying all those positions that we hadn't heard of before. And he was telling me with tears dripping off his cheeks. He said, that's how wicked we were. So wow. that came straight from the horse's mouth, that's what goes on. But the brethren are never told that. Brethren are never told that. So, and that's why my story on the aphrodisiac stag, when we get to that one's quite a funny one. Because they're all into the sexual thing. They hounded me on, as I say in the book, or hounded Pip and I. And finally, I just had to almost swear at him. And I just said to him straight out, if you think I've been a filthy bastard or whatever before we got married, and you think that's the sort of person I am, I said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just tell me then? Because we didn't. We were completely clear. And then he bowed down. And he was the priest that does all the somersaults. He just about did a forward roll onto the floor. Oh, no, Neville, I would never think of you like that. I said, well, shut up then. And it was never, ever spoken of again, but it took up 3 priestly visits just on that sexual side. They were just getting off on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's serious. That side of it is serious.
And that still goes on today. Like, you hear a lot of it. I had some horror stories land on my lap a couple of days ago, and it's just heart-wrenching what they put people through inside there.
They love it.
Yeah.
They love it. The other one we had, which was a pretty serious one, was in a house in Auckland where an Indian family was being really dealt to. And there was 3 children in the family. The wife had died, so the husband was caring for the children, come out from India, and the brethren had set them up in Auckland. And he rang me. I didn't know him. He rang me and said that they were having trouble. Things were being stolen out of their house. And I said, well, what do you mean? What's been stolen out of your house? And he said, well, they just walked in here and picked up my computer and just walked out with it. And he said, I contested it and tried to get it. And they wouldn't give it back to me. And they took it away and had it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was. Must have downloaded the whole thing probably and then brought it back to him. I said, well, you can't put up with that. That's criminal. These guys need to go to jail. Oh, well, he said, there's other things they're saying. They're just absolutely beating us into the ground. So I don't know whether he asked me to come up, but asked for help or whatever. And I said, well, look, I'll come to Auckland and see you then. So I grabbed Leon Jansen and we went up there. And as we got out of the car, he said, you're being watched. He said, there's a camera up on the roof of the house next door, and it shines straight in my lounge and kitchen. They can see everything that goes on in my house. And so as I walked past, I saw the camera, so I just gave them a good wave. We went inside and he pulled all the curtains. I said, what are you pulling all the curtains for? Oh, he said, well, I don't want them to see what we're doing in here, and there's others over the fence there. They're brethren too. I don't want them to see that you're here, really. So he pulled all the curtains, and he said, I'm frightened somebody's going to come and have a go at me or whatever. And I thought, oh, maybe he's an Indian and he's overreacting. Well, we were sitting there discussing it, and all of a sudden I see a shape coming along in front of the curtains, and I just said to Rom, look out, there's somebody coming. And he just leapt up, get out of here, go, get out. And he was almost yelling. Well, we up and disappeared out of the room and down the hall, and this house we'd never been in before, jumped into a room that happened to be his office and slammed the door shut. and then listen, and we could hear what was happening. And this young guy came in and he just tore strips off Rom. He said, "You got people in, who have you got in here?" And Rom said, "Well, I don't have to tell you who I've got in here." Rom was withdrawn from. He didn't have to tell him anything. And the yelling and shouting started, and he was pleading with this guy to get out. And he said, "No, I'm not getting out." He said, "Where have you hidden them? I'm going to go and get them. Where have you hidden these guys?" And I'm looking at Leon, and Leon's a bit bigger than me. I said, "Hey," I said, we're in for a fight." Well, I was used to that with all the poaching we have at the Sounds. I've had 30 people through court. I know what it is to have to fight. And I said, "We're going to have to deal with it. This is going to go violent." So I said to Leon, "You get on the floor and lean up against the door, and I'll hold the door up here." But I said, if he's strong enough to come in, it's only going to take one punch and he'll be on the carpet. So I stood there holding the door with effort I could, ready for the next one, while Leon's down on the floor sweating with fright because he'd never been in a brawl in his life. And he came to the door, then he turned around and he walked away. And I heard him go and shut the door. So we came out, and I thought, this is going to be interesting. Came out into the lounge, and Rom just sat there. We're on his left, and he just sat there just looking at the floor, not saying a word, not moving, as if he'd been comatose. And I thought, oh, perhaps the guy's hit him or something. So I said to Rom, did he know we were here? And he said, "Well, look at your 4 shoes on the floor and your cup of tea each on the little table." He said, "Of course they knew 2 of you were here." Well, that was obvious. We'd disappeared, but all our evidence hadn't. And so I said to him, I didn't say any more because I could tell there was a problem. So I thought, I'll let Leon make the first move. So he turned to Rom and he said, "Who was it, Rom?" And Rom never answered him. And I thought, this is fair, because the Indians talk, very quick, and they're very quick off the mark with their voices. And I thought, something's wrong. So Leon asked him again, and he said, "Who was it, Rom?" And he just looked at the floor and he said, "It was your own son." Oh. And it happened to be Leon's own son, who he loved, who was still in fellowship. He's the only one in his family left in fellowship. And I looked at Leon straight away, and I literally saw, this is not exaggerating, I literally saw the colours fade out of his cheeks with shock when he realised that that person that was after him and I was going to break his jaw was his own son.
Wow.
Visiting Auckland, and he married the girl who was a next door neighbour to the Indian's house. So he was at that house, and somebody must have called and said, "Hey, Rom's got crooks in there, go and deal with it." And he happened to be the closest young man who would be prepared to, get into a brawl. But I just thank the Lord he never opened that door, because it would have been all over. Because when I listened out in the lounge, I knew he was capable of being violent. So we would have had to react that way to protect ourselves. So when I left, I said to Rom, "Well, how are we going to stop these people invading your house? That guy had no right to crash into his house." And I said, "I know what I'll do. Do you want to see these priests back in your house again?" He said, No. I said, "I could give you a break for 2 years." He said, "Oh, really?" So I rang the police. Had a chat to the police, and I said, "I think you know how evil these exclusive brethren are and how violent they are, don't you?" And the guy on the phone said, "Yes, I do." I thought, oh, good, we're on the same page. I told the police what had happened in the house. I told him about having his computer flogged without his consent and all the rest of it. So I picked out the 3 leading priests in Auckland, who one of them was a Simmons, and I got the police to deliver a trespass notice which forbade them to go back into that property for 2 years or go to jail. So those 3 leading priests could never go back and see into Rom's house for 2 years. Mm. So that's how you deal with priests you don't want.
Man, what a story.
Yeah, that's true blue. Leon would back that all the way. Yeah. I keep in touch with the Indians. Maybe once a year I just give them a ring and see how they are, but they may have had faults. But no matter when you've got faults, you should never be treated like that.
Yeah.
All our faults have to be dealt with, but in the priestly level, everything gets handled absolutely the worst possible way you could do it. And it's all to injure those people and make them feel bad and make the priest feel elated. The other one was Pip's sister, my sister-in-law. She got withdrawn from, and that was the Miles Deck case, which was an awful case. And here, that's one of the three of the worst that I've actually put in here. And when she was withdrawn from, husband just died in their 50s with 5 children. And a person who was involved came back and told me when your sister-in-law was withdrawn from, the priest came home and they literally jumped and danced over the chairs and the sofas in the lounge. I mean, this is Russia. This is Iran. Those guys doing that sort of thing, they should be in jail. And that woman had to suffer that for 6 years or however many years it was. And the reason they withdrew for her, they didn't actually have anything on her. Nothing. They wanted to link her with somebody else they wanted to withdraw. So she went through all that and it smashed her family to smithereens. Not because they had anything against her. They had nothing on her. Nothing. They wanted to link her with an adultery offence to get rid of the guy. And the guy happened to be my brother-in-law. And it never happened. It was a complete jacked up case against the Deck family in New Zealand because Symington hated the Decks because Ron Deck brought in the pause after Aberdeen, which was the very right thing that should have been done. There should have been a pause and a regroup. But because Symington wanted to control the Brethren, he dealt with Ron Deck to get rid of the pause. Right. And then they gave ministry on how the sins of the fathers go down to the next generation. So they wanted to deal with Miles. So they accused those two of adultery, withdrew from both of them. She was totally innocent. Miles was totally innocent, but they got rid of another Deck. That's how wicked and evil the Miles Deck withdrawal was. He got fired for work. He was Ivory Brothers' top salesman. They fired him. He picked up his briefcase and they wouldn't even give him the company car to drive home from Petone to Wellington, which that's a long way. He had to walk down the road and get a bus to get home to his family. And He was their top salesman. So serious case that was. When you think of that, to get him, they had to get rid of her and put her through hell just because they wanted to have a go at Ron Deck's son, who hadn't done anything wrong. I mean, this priestly thing, this level of evil in the priestly circle is off the charts.
Yeah, there's just story after story, isn't there? It's yeah. I agree with you. There's just so many very horrifying stories of how, and yeah, they're all lives. Like, you know, you can almost get overload from just hearing story after story after story. But each person, it's not also just an individual. It's their spouse, their children, their employees, their extended family. Like, each one of these lives that has been devastated by this spiritual abuse and terrible use of power, it's an implosion within a family as well.
Yes. I've got a friend in Nelson who was withdrawn from, and his wife was taken off him. And the neighbours rang him and said, look, we're seeing things happen around your house at night. We had it too. And these guys are coming and prowling around your house and looking in the windows or whatnot at night in the pitch dark, and we're not going to put up with it. We've got baseball bats and we're going to go and deal with them. Well, very kind neighbours. I wouldn't mind a neighbour like that. And so he went out and bought a whole lot of women's underwear and hung it on his clothesline. to turn these perverted priests on, which I thought that was a bit of a crack up. Yeah, just to give them something to go home with,
Oh, man.
But we had a funny one in Nelson over the Clive Petrie jailing case. And 4 women came to me. They asked who could help. And my friend mentioned my name. And I said, well, I'm not going to them. I don't want to get involved in that. If they want to come to me, that's fine. So they did. So I took up their case for them and found out when women get in that situation, they can't face going to the police station on their own and meeting a male policeman and having to spill the beans. That's what stops them going to court with these cases. That's step 1 that stops them. So I said, well, I'll do that for you, but I won't go any further. I'll get you in the door and then I'm gone. And I did. They got the guy. And that's where the Tony McCallum comes in, and terrible battles we had with him in Wellington and the TV. And anyway, I thought I'll go to the closing day in the court and hear what Clive Petrie's lawyers got to say about his innocence. So I walk in and there's a guy sitting there in the back seat in the public gallery, and I have to step over him to get past him. He's wearing a suit and tie. And I get in there and I hear the lawyer going off about this ex-member who's vindictive against the brethren, and he's brought my client in here and he's not guilty. And I'm looking at this lawyer and he's looking at me and he's really spouting off, and I was thinking, if only you knew, mate, you're talking to me. So that was quite funny. When I went to get up to go out, I looked at this guy again and I thought, I don't believe it. It's Jeff Smith, the leading priest in Nelson. And I'd been sitting alongside him, didn't recognise him. He hadn't recognised me. So I thought, I'll have a chat. So he gets up to go out, and just as we leave the courtroom, still in the courtroom, I said, "G'day, Jeff. Really nice to see you." And I'll never argue or anything, always pleasant, ask about health and the weather and keep the exclusive brethren thing right out of it. And he turned around and he took one look at me and his jaw just dropped and he off. And when I say off, I mean running. He ran out, he ran down the corridor, he went to go down the steps. And I thought, yeah, I think I can go down. I'm a hunter. I hunt alpine country. I think I can go down these stairs a bit quicker than you. And he went to go down them, and then he saw the lift, and he thought, oh no, be safer in the lift. And I thought, you beauty, we're going to get in the lift together. I can't believe this. And he presses the button like this. So I get in the lift with him, and I said, "G'day, Jeff. We're up pretty close now. It's really good to see you." And his chin was going. It was literally just shaking on his jaw. He was trembling with fear. And I said, "What's wrong?"
Frightened of you?
"Jeff," I said, "we're friends. We grew up together. We're Christians. What's wrong? Why can't you just talk to me?" And as the lift went down, he looked at the ground button and he started pressing it before he got to the ground floor. And he just went boom, 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 about 20 times before the door was open. He was completely out of it.
Wow.
And out of the lift and out the corridor and out the back front door, and there's a big car park quite close to the road. And I thought, how can I stop this guy? How can I put a spanner in the works? So I said to him, "Oh, did you hear that Bruce Hales is going to withdraw from you?" Well, he stopped so suddenly I bumped into him. He just put the brakes on. Whompo! Spun around. Well, what do you mean? He said, and his jaw was all trembling. And I said, because of the Clive Petrie case, I wanted to bring the 4 women into your meeting room for your assembly meeting. And if they would hear their accuser say sorry and carry the brethren with it, they will not go to court. I said, wouldn't that have been a better option in all these court cases? And now he's in jail going to be for 2 years or whatever. But when we made that request, McCallum and McNaughton in Sydney approved it because I heard him on the phone. They rang Nelson and you stopped it. So I think he's going to withdraw from you. Well, that made it worse for him because everything I said was true. And he just freaked out. And I thought, well, I'm going to follow him, but I don't want him to get into the big part of the car park. If I could keep him up this end, I'm going to be able to walk a little further with him, as Stanley McCallum would say, down the Mobile Road together. So we headed into the car park, and I stayed on the roadside of him. And when we go between two cars, I'd go a bit faster. Then I'd come out and I'd cut him off, and he'd have to turn back. So I kept on turning him back into the end of the car park where his car wasn't, because I knew he was heading for where his car was. So I was trying to stop him. Well, we went right across this car park. We must have gone through 20 cars. And I thought, where on earth are we going? We came to the end of the car park, and there was a garden, and there were plants and shrubs about 6 foot high, all quite close together. And then there was a drop off of about half a metre into the next driveway. And here I am following him, and he's charging through these bushes through this garden. And I said, you're lost, Jeff. You're lost. Stop. Where are you going? You're getting lost. Well, he went through these bushes and over this bank, and we ended up in the backyard of some private residence. I mean, I just couldn't believe what was happening. And then, of course, he had to turn left to get out to the road. So then we walked together all the way out to the road. And I was just talking to him gently all the way. Jeff, something is wrong. Why can't we just talk together? Christians don't act like this. Talked to him all the way. He went out, got in his car, held the door open for him just to help him along. And when he was ready and got his seatbelt on, I thanked him very much, and I shut the door, and he tootlooed off. I went and got my vehicle, which was just behind him a bit. And when I pulled out, I got down the road 50 metres, and here he is in his car. He pulled up and parked again, and he was just leaning forward with his eyes shut. I reckon he just about had a heart attack. And he obviously couldn't drive on, and that's why he pulled up and parked again. And I look at that whole story, and I think, this thing's just not real. Something is just so far out of kilter. I wasn't attacking him. I never said anything nasty. I respected him fully when I tried to talk to him. Only thing I said to him about was those real life pictures tell you what's going on underneath that you don't normally get a chance to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the priestly service, it's there's so much damage in it. Was the aphrodisiac stag. And when we were shut up, my brother-in-law, who was a fringy, he got shut up sometime after we did. And we were driving out for a picnic one day, and here he is driving the bulldozer that I sold him when my business was sold, driving it on the Lord's Day. So I leant out the window and went as if to say, naughty boy, what are you doing on the bulldozer on the Lord's Day? And he just put his thumb up and went as if to say, yeah, mate, right, but this is good. I thought, so you shut up too. So what had happened was, and then a day or two later, he would bring his bulldozer across the road by my vineyard, and you have to plank a machine on the road so it doesn't cut the tarmac up. So you put a board on the road, you drive the dozer on it, and then you put another one in the front, you drive ahead, you get the one at the back, put that in the front. So it's quite a job on your own. So I thought, I wonder if I go out and do that for him, we could get into a little bit of a conversation, which when you're both shut up, of course, is wrong. But I thought, well, it's safety, it's health and safety, because a car might come along and have an accident, so I give him a hand. So I did that for him. When he pulled over onto the grass, I thought, he's either going to give me a smile and he's going to be with me, or he's going to be against me. Or thirdly, he might have had a spiro turn and he's trying to trap me so he can go back to the priest and say, hey, Neville came and talked to me while he was shut up. That's not good. So, you go back and be tougher on him. I mean, he could have been doing that too. So I had to assess all this, and he turned the motor off, and I thought, oh, he's going to talk. Could he turn the motor off? Then he looked down at me and smiled. That was the first smile we'd had since we'd been shut up. And I thought, oh, he's on my side. So he got off the machine and we had a chat. We talked for about half an hour. And in the middle of it, he said, how many stags have you shot lately? And I said, Norm, because this is frowned on in the Brethren, and we'd been taken to task on this in the meeting for going hunting. So we'd already been whacked about it. And then he blatantly just said, you've been hunting. I said, no. And I used the worst words I could have used. No, Norm, I'm a good boy. Well, that came back in every visit right till the bitter end. And Neville McCallum thinks he's a good boy. And anyway, I said, well, what about you then? You've been hunting? He said, yeah. He said, I went and got a stag and it was covered with velvet on the antlers, which of course you sell off to China for, a sex stimulant. And he said, I got $12.50 for it, which back in those days, that was like $1,250. And so the priest come after this session, the priest came next time and they said, do you really think you're feeling your position? That's why this comes into the book on nearly every page to the end. And I said, well, I think so, yes. Well, we don't think you are. No. Well, why? Can you tell me? They said, no, the Lord should be telling you to tell us. You should know what you're doing if you're not feeling your position. I thought, now what have I done? I got my farm right. That's been a problem. We had a caravan. That was a problem. I haven't been eating and drinking with anybody, and I still got the one wife, and I sort of just went on and on like it does for half an hour with all these long emotional, psychological abuse gaps, when you wind the old alarm clock up so it goes off on the mantelpiece all the time. And I finally said, well, look, if you're not going to tell me what I've done, you might as well go home, because I cannot honestly think of what I've done. And they said, well, you told somebody you were a good boy. And I thought, I don't believe this. So Norman, my brother-in-law, has potted me at his priestly visit, and he's potted me, calling me a good boy. Now, he knew when he did that, I was going to be in more trouble, because he's a bit of a jokester, right? So he potted me just to make my case worse. And then I thought, how can I get back at him, you little snot? Of course, I had to accept. Then I spent half an hour trying to prove to them I didn't mean that I was a good boy. It was a joke, but they wouldn't take it a joke because it was fuel for their priestly abuse. And I couldn't get away from this. I was a good boy, and I should never have said that. And then they said, well, what did you talk to Norman about? And I said, well, we didn't say anything about the brethren. We didn't say anything negative about the brethren. But, one thing he did tell me, though, and I suddenly thought of it. He went hunting and he got this stag with all this sexual stuff on the horns, and he sold it for an aphrodisiac, went to India or somewhere, and he got $12.50. They said, and I could see in their eyes, give me some of that stuff. I could just see it coming out of them. They couldn't get out of our room quick enough to get round to his place to have a go at him because he'd been hunting. So this is how it works,
Oh,
and when I met my brother-in-law in the review, we didn't talk about any of this past stuff too much, but I brought that one up with him. I said, you dirty beggar, over the good boy. But I said, I got you with the sex stimulant, didn't I? And he just burst out laughing. He hadn't forgotten it either. I'd got it back on him because he would have taken a pounding over that.
Funny.
Yeah. So that was one that was funny. But
wow.
I think we saved ourselves by not doing what others did. We didn't stay at home and mope when we were shut up and withdrawn from. We got out and we went for picnics. We just deliberately just went out and had a picnic just to get away from it. And I saw others not do that. Then they turned to drink and, the marriages broke up. We did the opposite. I had a caravan, which I had to have because I had to sleep on the vineyard because I couldn't work, and the workers would come and meet me in the caravan, tell me what they'd done, and then I'd tell them what to do when I had the neck issue.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a caravan, so we'd wait till the brethren were at the meetings, and we'd whip out with the caravan and go and have a night somewhere until we got potted. So we had a caravan, but all those things I think helped to keep us stable in that critical 6 months or 12 months after you were drawn from.
Yeah. Incredibly easy to be completely psychologically destroyed at that point and to be really full of despair. So you're saying that you guys managed to keep finding some things that gave you space and headspace and gave you some joy.
Sometimes when we felt a bit down and we could tell something might happen that, wouldn't be good, we just get in the vehicle and we just go out and drive for an hour. And you look at the scenery and you forget the pressure. It just gives you that little bit of release. And we did that for months.
You guys were shut up for a long time though. Like how long were you shut up for before you withdrawn from?
3 years.
Yeah.
So we just kept doing those little things. We only got one.
For the listener, it's like for those who aren't familiar with the Brethren, sorry, but this means like complete social isolation. Like Neville said, you can't just go and have coffee with your neighbour or have some other friends you met somewhere else around, because then you'll get even more in trouble for that. And you can't have anything to do with any brethren, no letters, no phone calls, nothing. So like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So it's horrendous. It's the psychological equivalent of, like, it is silent treatment. It's like throwing somebody into what do they call it? Isolation at the prison cells, right? Like it's hard for people to wrap their heads around because there's not physical walls or chains holding you down, but psychologically you're in this silent zone. Forbidden from social contact with outsiders. It's horrendous. Like to experience that for 3 years is horrific.
And you can feel it in the story. Like when I read that book, you could feel the length.
Yeah. And that's still doing it. Like, my father was shut up for 2 years and months. It was so common, and it still is common for people to go for months without being visited. And it's just so cruel because the priests are like your lifeline. They're holding your life in the balance. They're the ones who get to say like whether you live or die, and they can just sit there and not visit you for weeks or months, leaving you like, yeah.
We only had one visit in 13 months.
There you go. That's an example of it. That's just
to start off, which was the worst time.
Yeah,
6 months before we got a visit, and then 5 months. Yeah, that's 11 months. And then they came much, much quicker after that, when I had to defend my little bike and how sick I was, and we had a stillborn child, so they used that, of course, to push their barrow and that's why we jumped into another church quite quickly, because of our children. After we were out, we acted reasonably quickly there as well to try and build a friendship base for them and for ourselves. And fortunately, one of the persons there used to be in the meeting in Wellington. And she spoke to Pip, because Pip was from Wellington, and said, look, we realise the situation you people are in. Come round and have a cup of tea with us. So she realised what a huge predicament that was. And she said, I'm sure that Neville will get on with my husband well, because he's a hunter. I thought, that's okay. And I get in there and I meet him round the back of the house. He's got this great big long beard. Oh, beards are wrong. You shouldn't have beards, And I've got to associate with this guy with a big beard. So that was the first little negative. And he turned out to be one of my best friends. So they knew just where to plug the gap, which is what we're trying to do with people coming out now, just to try and get them at the right time, like we did with the guy Gordon in Thames. I had to talk to him, and he was going to jump off a bridge. That's how far he got. So I just straight into the North Island, Graham Leon, and we just drove straight up to his house to just try and give him some support in those critical first few days. And that goes on as that today.
It is really preached in there right now, really preached in there, that it is really better to take your life than it is to leave.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Like I had a story, again, all the stories that land on my lap. I had a story, the same thing. Literally, they used the word suicide.
Yeah, they did. What? Yeah, I gave that to the Royal Commission.
Okay, yeah, so you knew about it, yeah. It's just heart-wrenching. I mean, that's why we're all doing what we're doing. Each one of us here, right? This is why we do it. We do it because we care. We do it because this has to stop. This has to stop.
No, we want the folks inside that are listening to this. Even though we don't know you, we still care about you.
Yeah.
Because we know the circumstances. We're not against you.
Mm.
We just hope something clicks. You hear something or you see something that helps you sort it out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thanks for sharing all these stories, Neville. As Cheryl said, it's not just your history, it's the history of your wider family, and it's our history too, because it's people who have impacted our lives and our generations and our extended family members, and it's just the same strength.
We're in this together, aren't we?
We're in this together. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And it's also super cool to hear of your ongoing support for leavers and that kind of thing, and that you've got this wee pad there in the Sounds. I've still never visited, but it sounds amazing. So yes,
we hope you can come and see us sometime. And
I hope that you'll be able to help many more people. It's love your generosity.
It's quite funny with the person with lost the 8 children and the money and whatnot. He came in, he said, well, I don't want to see any brethren. But when we came home that day, we met all the brethren coming back from the Nelson interchange on the road between the Blenheim and the port. It's half an hour travel. And when we come into church, we often meet 25 cars going to Nelson when they were doing interchange, was not now. And then we'd go back, and later in the day, we'd meet them, all the drunkies all coming back with the little kids driving, because they're too intoxicated. And so we're driving home, and all of a sudden he's driving down the road thinking he's escaped from the exclusive brethren. Next minute, exclusive brethren.
Yeah.
One after the other drove past on the highway. Yeah.
Oh man, I've had that happen to me before as well. Yeah, and because often it's like almost like a convoy, right? Because they're all leaving, or they're all
together. Yeah. Some of the younger ones know my vehicle and boat and everything now, and they'll actually wave out to me before I wave to them.
Wow.
It's quite funny to know us that well. Yeah. They're probably thinking, I'd love to get in that boat.
Yeah, I bet they are. Yeah.
Oh, they are. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to wind it up.
I wondered if you did. I know you have little ones. Yeah.
Well, lovely to see you both. And
good.
Yeah, thanks again, Neville, for sharing this stuff. It's flipping brilliant to have it on record like this.
Thank you so much, Lindy, for coming. Okay, take care, love.
Guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Let's start with your mom.
Yeah, her case was a very sad one. She came off an orchard with a nice home and gardens and everything else. My father dies. My sister, who was living with her on the orchard property, she gets married, then mum's on her own, but she's not allowed to live on her own. So she has to come and live with me. So she goes from normally had 40 acres, a 2-storied home and a garden and just the normal thing somebody would have, into a room 4 meters by 4 meters, and that's all she had, with 2 young, yelling, screaming kids. I mean, it was just so wrong. And she was forced to live there. And obviously it got her down. Didn't take long before it got her down. And we were having an argument one day about what she should do or shouldn't do. And that perhaps she should build onto the back of my house to make, more rooms for her. And she slapped me, just like a mother would slap a son. It didn't actually hit me. I saw it coming, but I had to tell the priest of what was happening and whatnot. So they put it in front of Symington, and he withdraws from her. So here she is, nowhere to live. Her house had been sold by this time, so she had nowhere to go. She had a section that she could have built on, that she wanted to build on, that they wouldn't let her build on, and it had a garden shed. So she made her bed in a bath, in a garden shed. coming from a 40-acre orchard, 2-storied home.
Oh, that's heart-wrenching.
She's in a bath trying to live. No shower, no running water, no power, no nothing. And we are there watching this happen every day, which was the worst part of it.
And they think this is okay and humane.
Yeah, absolutely inhumane. I mean, anybody in the Exclusive Brethren listening to this podcast that listens to something like that, if that doesn't rock you to the core, something is wrong.
Yeah.
And they got away with that. So to keep the story short, he gets on top of her properly, so she tries to commit suicide. And fortunately, when she jumped in the water, it was so cold, it gave her such a shock, it woke her, it sort of brought her back to her senses again. And she came home in the car and saw me and tried to run me over. So finally, she stopped, and I went to try and investigate. I thought, this is getting pretty bad. I've got to do something here. And her nightie, she was in a nightie, absolutely dripping wet from head to foot. And she'd come back from a dam that she knew where she jumped in. And so after that, it got bad enough that her family, and this is where it's so difficult, her family, who she could have nothing to do with after they were part of our family because all her siblings were never in fellowship, they turn the other cheek then, and they come back to help her in the situation she's in now, which is a tough call.
Yeah.
Because those people feel abused, ill-treated. When you tell them they're not fit to eat with, they don't normally help you. Well, they came back and helped my mother and gave her a home.
Wow. And
then she got married to a really an ex-EB guy from a neighbouring town, a really, really rough, hard, uncouth person, the opposite to my father, the absolute opposite to my father. But because she was so lonely, it connected, and they got married. And they lived away in another town, and then she got her house built that she wanted to build when she was in the meeting next to me. She builds a house, but she's got a husband now. So she builds this house, nice 2-storied home, and they live there, and we're next door. We have nothing to do with each other. But another out, because we're still in at this point, another out that we knew very well would visit Mum. And she came in one day and said to me, "You need to do something about your mother. She's being knocked about." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yes, she is." She said, "And I think you should step up." She was a little bit older than me, a woman that I really respected. So I thought, right. And by this time, we were out. But I still hadn't had anything to do with him. So I thought, right, I'm not going to muck around. And I know when I get in there, he's not going to like me coming in the house. It's probably going to be a bit of a whoopsie day, because that's the sort of person he was, hardcore farmer. And so I never knocked. I just thought, no, this is when you have to be a bigger bully than the bully if you want to win. Mm-hmm. So I never knocked. I just walked straight in. First time I ever met him. And I just walked straight in, and he was standing at the bottom of the stairs. And I said, "Where's Mum?" And he said, "Up there." I said, "Well, I'm going up." And I just walked straight at him. And I thought, this is gonna go one way or the other. And he stepped aside and let me go up. Yeah. So that's the first time that we'd met her since she'd been withdrawn from. And I go over that meeting in the book of being reunited. And then we took her home after that. Well, we looked after her. She got Parkinson's and had to have a walker trolley. So then he died. Fortunately, he died and got out of it. So she wasn't being knocked about or treated anymore. So we took her back into the family. And wherever we went, she came. We took her to Australia in a wheelchair.
Aww.
And she loved it. And yeah, that went on until she passed away. And we, in the last few months, we left our vineyard property and we came and lived in her house so that we could do what, the nurses had a certain amount to do, but we could do all the rest. So we did that till she passed. So that was a happy ending to what had been a very, very bad case.
Yeah. I can imagine it would have been very hard for you to walk yourself through all that too.
Oh, yeah. While we were still in it was, because I knew I should have gone over and tried to do something. And my brother-in-law and I, we and then they diagnosed her as being mental. So then we had to put her in our car and take her groaning all the way to Nelson, which is a two-hour trip, and put her in the mental institution. She wasn't mental.
No.
And within a couple of weeks in there, she wasn't mental at all. She came out again. So she had to go through all that just because that's what Symington wanted to be done. Yeah. So that case and the Miles Deck case were two really serious cases. And the other one, the Lawrence Faulkner case, when that Terry Deck handled that case, he was a cripple from the waist down, so he had to have bags for everything. When he went to the morning meeting, he got up at 4:00. His wife got him up at 4:00 to prepare him to be able to go to the morning meeting. And that guy lived like that from his engagement night till he was 70-something years old.
You recount that in your book, and it is just absolutely heart-wrenching reading it. And it's just, I hope every insider that reads this book realizes what a hellhole they are in, treating people like that. To me, that is the lowest point of abuse that you can give is somebody who is disabled, and then you're doing what you like. It's just horrific, absolutely horrific.
That's what the bullies do.
Yeah,
they pick on the weak and the vulnerable.
Yeah,
and that's what Hales is doing. He picks on the weak. He wants their money, and the weak, they can't buck the system because the rim of fire's there, so they're locked in.
Yeah.
Something has to happen from the inside out.
I agree.
Maybe. Yes. So I think that was all regarding Mum's case. It was a horrific case, really. But at least we were reunited with her as a family, which that was
you got to experience that. Yeah.
Yep. I spoke to JT Jr.'s daughter-in-law about what I was being told out here about JT Jr. because I'd questioned JT Jr. in the review, and that's what the priest didn't like, was me questioning whether he was right or wrong. And they said, well, he said that if the sun shone when he was buried, he was right. And something else, I forget what the other thing was. So I put this to Margaret Wilson, and I put that to her, and she said, what a joke. She said, that's a joke that's gone around the world. She said, that wasn't true. She said, we said that as a joke. And then she said the other joke was that as the priests were carrying the coffin, it got lighter, and that I think that's in the letter I sent you.
So this is a letter from Margaret Wilson to Neville. And it's just so for our listeners that aren't watching this and are listening instead, it says, hi, Neville. I see you're still struggling fighting the battle on many fronts. Keep up the good work. It is freedom or bondage for many. My feelings on this question of rain or shine at Jim's burial is that this is a red herring. Jim had no authority to make such a claim. His teachings were erroneous. Many opposed them, but it was nearly impossible to depose him due to the way the Brethren movement was organized. My husband has read your letter, and his immediate comment was that JT Jr. would not have spoken to Ben once Ben was out of fellowship. The split in New York was on the 22nd of August, and JT Jr., I think, died in October. But when he was in bed with MK, guy, my husband, is sure that the last thing on his mind was his funeral, whether the sun shone or not. I'm absolutely sure that there was no contact between Ben and his dad. This claim that Jim made a pact with Ben regarding the sun shining or not shining was not spoken about at the time. I am sure the Taylor family would have mentioned it if it had happened. We were very close at this time and spoke to each other nearly every day. I can see the Jimites are using this latest story as a ploy to hold on to their shaky members, a feeble attempt. James said in a circular letter regarding his father's death that as they carried the coffin, it grew lighter. Some felt that this meant that the coffin weighed less or that Jim had been resurrected. Exclusives are very gullible, refuse facts, or not allowed access to facts, remain ignorant. Jim died on the very day that the case instigated by JT Jr. against Ben Taylor, called Taylor versus Taylor, came to the court. Both James and Ben were called away from the courtroom to their father's deathbed. Hardly a father of love. The concept of letting the weather decide the outcome of a past is primitive, heathen, and superstitious. It is certainly not New Testament. One makes judgments using honest witness. Ben's witness regarding his father's alcoholism, along with the filth that came through on the tapes of Aberdeen, coupled with the witness of those hundreds of wholesome brethren that attended those meetings, is ample information for any clear-thinking person. It is difficult for your EB friends to see this, but the ministry of JT Jr. is classic cult material. Perhaps a discussion of other cults might help them to see the parallel of this cult. The most glaring attribute is their nearly complete loss of freedom and inability to use their God-given brain to make decisions. For example, since we've been out, we have lived in Bermuda for 12 years, been active members of several churches. Our son taught English in China for a year. We give to charity. I work for the Red Cross and learn from the people I help, etc. We enjoy our television because we can control it and enjoy deep friendships with other ex-exclusives. Perhaps we could set up a correspondence between newly freed exclusives and those of us who have had time to adjust. I'm sure many of my friends would be happy to do this. Wow, that's a great letter.
It is, isn't it?
She gives it with an exclamation mark.
Yep, and it comes right from the horse's mouth, from the family that it needed to come from. As she said, they keep using those things to just justify his existence. The whole alcohol thing, we have covered some of it, where JT Sr. was the first to condone the drinking of strong alcohol. My father told me that. And my father went to Auckland. His brother lived there. He went to Auckland when the Aussies first started to come and interfere in New Zealand, which would have been pre-65, pre-Bruce and John. And they came to Auckland. They came to Dad's brother's home, my uncle, quite a number of them, for an evening. And they apologised because they were late. And they said, oh, well, we queued up at the pub to get a drink, and the queue was that long, it held us up for half an hour. And back in the early 60s, if you were caught at a pub in New Zealand, you'd get shut up. I mean, that was an offence back in the old days, you know. And here these Aussies were coming over here saying they'd just been to the pub, and they were brassed off that they got held up. They said something like we had to push our way in.
Oh, wow.
But they knew Dad was against drink. And they knew my uncle was too. My family never ever drank hard drink. The only thing they ever drank about 3 times a year was a stout, and that was all. And we were really warned against it because some of our good friends were alcoholics in the Brethren. So Dad taught us very carefully what to do or what not to do with alcohol. So they asked Dad a question. And they turned to my father and they said, well, how much would we have to drink before you'd call us an alcoholic? It was a loaded question because they were not happy about the way Dad and his brother thought about alcohol. And Dad thought, oh, how am I going to get out of this one? And then he said, if you can't live without it. And there was just a deathly silence in the room. Who could answer that? That was 1 glass a week or 1 glass a minute. It didn't matter. He said, if you can't live without it, you're alcoholic.
I just want to pause here for a second because the alcohol culture inside the PBCC right now is probably the worst it's ever been. So this is what I'm going to put out to you, everybody who listens to these, and we know so many inside are listening to these.
Right.
If you cannot live without alcohol, you have a problem.
Correct.
I just want you guys to take that to heart. And this isn't scolding. This isn't telling anybody, oh, you're an alcoholic. I just want you to take that to heart and realize that it's an issue and that issue can be dealt with. You should not need alcohol to live.
True. So he got away with it because he didn't put a quantity on it. At that time, when those Aussies started to come to New Zealand, just a year or two prior to the Haleses, that's when the drinking thing in New Zealand actually started to escalate. It was really the Aussies that came and pushed that seemed to just push the New Zealanders into thinking that it was okay. And I know they used to say to my father, because being on the land, you have droughts and you have storms and you have floods and you have pests. So there's a reasonable amount of stress in running an orchard or whatever. And they would say to him, oh, Bruce, why don't you just go home, stop worrying about it and just have a good hard scotch? I mean, that was brethren in our locality here saying that to him because they knew that he didn't drink anything hardly. And one brother came round one day and he said, if you have a lot of kids, he said, what would you do? And they're all rowing and whatnot. And this guy was a guy that drank a lot and didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything, just lived for the meetings and all the rest of it. So he stay home from the weekends and drink all the weekend. And Dad said, well, he said, what I'd do, he said, I'd buy a dinghy and I'd take them out for a row and let them enjoy creation rather than stay home, drink whiskey and then piddle it down the urinal. And I remember him saying that and I was thinking, you'll get yourself withdrawn from if you keep talking like that. But he just came straight out with it. And that was so right. That was so correct what he said. And unfortunately, he never ever turned to drink. He never drank at all, hardly. And I think we did cover it that I'd spoken to one of my family members in there about the young, and he said all they had to do, to be able to drink. I thought that's so sad. That's the potential of the whole church in those young teenagers, and all they're being taught to do is to drink whiskey because they're not allowed to do anything else.
So sad.
I mean, we were told that what we were doing back prior to 59 was the same as what we're doing now with our life and with our friends, like at the Bay. We'd go to a park out of town and maybe 10 families would go. We'd take a cricket ball and a bat and some wickets and we'd have an evening meal out in the paddock and we'd have a game of cricket. I mean, that's what life's all about. Mm-hmm. Or in the hot season, we'd go down and invite a couple of families and we'd go down to a beach and we'd have a swim. All that got knocked on the head. We were told that we were not to do those things and that if we went anywhere, we were not to take another family with us. That's the teaching before I left. And then I was talking to somebody a few years ago, probably only 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they said, oh, you know the Exclusive Brethren? I said, yeah, I do pretty well. They said, well, we met a group of them. We don't know whether it's them or not. We went to a beach for a swim, lovely beach where I live here, and they came down for a swim, and they all had a swim in black suit trousers and white shirts because they were not allowed to take any of their clothes off. So they all went swimming in their meeting attire.
Yeah.
I said, it looks so weird. I said, yeah, that's definitely them. Yeah. So funny little things that come up time to time. The other thing that we didn't talk about, and you might want to make a comment on the letter that Bruce sent back to me with his signature, with those famous words, let the truth came out, and he underlined the word truth because nothing can hurt it.
So yeah, give a little background to this letter first.
I worked on the idea that when you're looking for for a problem with somebody, if you can get them to communicate with you, there's one chance in 100 they might say something that they shouldn't, which exposes them. And that was my motive for writing this letter. And I think that's exactly what happened. He answered me back, which I appreciated. But he put those famous words in there about the truth and underlined the word truth.
Yeah, I'm gonna read this for the listeners.
Okay.
So this is dated October 19th, 2004, and it's to Mr. Neville McCallum. This is from Bruce Hales himself. Dear Neville, I acknowledge receipt of your postcard dated October 11th. Please note that this letter is in a fully enclosed sealed envelope. As far as I recall, I have not failed to read and to respond to your previous correspondence. You may recall following your first letter, I attempted to speak to you on the phone. I think you are away on holidays. I note your use of the word warning twice. Beloved brother, and in brackets it says in fellowship or out of fellowship. Your present position has certainly not resulted from my hands. As to the truth, and it's underlined, coming out, let it. One is never afraid of the truth and can never do anything against it. See 2 Corinthians 13, verse 8. I have forwarded your correspondence to a brother in New Zealand in whom I have confidence for follow-up. I am sorry I have not sent a postcard. I have none so pretty as yours near at hand to send you. I appreciate your comments as to my health. It is improving somewhat under the mercy of the Lord's hand, and goodness and trust will improve further yet. I must finish that if you were back in fellowship and there is only one fellowship, read JND and JBS to confirm this, with the saints of God to whom you belong, then it would be a lot easier to be in contact with you and help you. I was in the west of New Zealand past August. Affectionately, in brackets, at a distance, in Christ, Bruce Hales. So when I read this letter, I was like, okay, he says it right then and there. Let the truth come out. That is what this podcast is all about, is everybody's truth coming out.
Correct.
He says it right then, right there, in bold, black and white, let it come out. So every single one of you that has been sitting on the fence of coming forward, that letter gives you permission to come out. Bruce Hales says it. Let the truth come out. That's what we're doing.
We're actually obeying him.
We are. We're taking instructions from the man of God.
I couldn't believe it when I read it. I thought, how can you write that in the letter in the face of the postcards I was sending him about child molestation and everything else, where he was deliberately trying to stop it, threatening to sue me, and put big, hefty 20-something stone McCorkle onto me for a vicious meeting in Wellington to cover it all up in the face of that letter.
I just don't understand. I mean, I do understand. I understand the business side of things, and that's how they view their congregation. It's just a business, right? In the presentation of a Christian church. But with everything that is coming at them, and I've said this in many podcasts, I just don't understand how those people can follow him. Talk about how he's got this compassion, he's got this, and he's, this just ball of love and light. When we are putting out podcast number 96, 97 at this point in time, and not one of us has had that compassion come our way. Nobody has come forward and to sit down with us and say, let's talk. Like, you have got to understand that the words that he speaks are absolute, pardon my French, bullshit, right? Like, you have got to understand that he does not walk his talk.
Sure. No, so he's just written down what is right to cover himself, but then doesn't practice it. And anybody from inside should be able to see that so easily. Yeah, so we'll hang on to that letter. There might be more mileage in it yet.
Oh, I'm sure there will be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only thing we haven't said anything about there is probably the postcards, which had an electrifying effect, as I think I said in one of the, I think I might have written it down, that I couldn't get anybody to reply to me. That's how I got that letter from Bruce Hales you've just read, because he mentions postcards in that letter.
Yeah.
And I tried at first putting them in envelopes, so all the gory details of child molestation and whatnot was covered up, and they still didn't come back to me. I thought, well, how about I leave it out of the envelope so the postie can read it and the postie and everybody else. And man, it was like sending a Scud missile onto his office, I think, because I got a response straight away. And then he wouldn't do anything about the whole situation, which I was pleading with him on the postcards to do, which I sent you a copy of the postcards. And so finally, of course, he threatened to sue me.
So these are copies of the postcards. I'll add these all into a folder in the description of this podcast for everybody to read. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through and read these. So these are all Neville's postcards to Bruce. And I am going to include them at the end of the podcast, and you guys can just go through them at your own time. Actually, I'm going to read this one. This is the fourth one. Dear Bruce, in fairness, you should have replied to my sealed letter dated 180505, hence this card, because you chose not to meet with and others to discuss the pending TV documentary, Further Damage to Withdrawn from Christians Occurred on New Zealand TV. Ellen Davis's testimony was defamatory and untrue, which could result in repercussions, compensation beyond your control. Some New Zealand brethren want this matter settled, but Ellen Davis will not cooperate. Is there part of you that I could appeal to before I take the next step? Surely Ellen Davis is not still your trusted man. Is he still an exclusive brethren priest? Bruce, you have not answered nor met with me over the possibility of 1, the brethren being deceived by lies and corruption of Aberdeen; 2, child molestation, police have been approached, etc., more to follow; 3, police inquire into brethren activities; 4, wrongful workplace dismissals, etc., etc. You could come forward and still be held in honor. Neville McCallum. You just touch on all the subjects and just that one postcard that, gets us going on these podcasts.
Then he threatened to sue me, of course, through that card in there for Wiseman. He threatened to sue me on behalf of Bruce because of all the lies and the misrepresentations, a whole list of things that were wrong. So I sent a card back to him, or letter back, and I included a twink pen, or a pen you cross out words with. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you call them.
Like a whiteout?
Yeah, whiteout. Yeah, I sent him a whiteout pen and told him to highlight all the things in my letter that was, as they said they were, wrong,
mm-hmm.
and so that I could apologise and put it right. Otherwise, could you please mail my brand new twink pen back to me? And guess what? I never got the pen back or anything else.
Of course you didn't.
Take that. But the cards really worked because, and that's why on one of them, to ID Bruce and to bring him out, I put leader of the exclusive brethren on the top of the postcard so that he couldn't conceal himself as being anybody else.
Well, you've given us like a lot of tools here for many people who are trying to reach him. So note taken, open postcards.
That's why I say on the bottom of one of those postcards, or bottom of the letter, I said it would be good if everybody, hundreds of people, all emailed Bruce on open postcards. Pretty little things, because everybody reads them.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of fun.
That was.
Yeah. Yeah. The Petrie and McLean cases were both court cases that went through the court, so they were public. And Petrie went away for a couple of years. He's since passed on. I can't remember. I think McLean went down as well, because we know his wife very well. But I was involved in that case too on behalf of his wife, and I finished up meeting with the police in the North Island where they were local. And the police guy was very, very good, very helpful, very supportive, couldn't have met a better guy. And we got talking about the Brethren and what he thought of them, and how the fact that the Brethren were supporting a guy who was proven in court to be a rapist, and they got rid of his wife and supported him. I talked to the police about it, and he said, well, we've seen things with exclusive brethren that are way outside the square. You couldn't trust what they were going to do. I said, well, give me an example. And he said they came into that area because they were surveilling somebody for drug trafficking. But the neighbour of this house they were doing a standover on was exclusive brethren. And he said, we're standing out on the street, not on Brethren property. And the owner of the property came out and said, what are you doing here? And he said, we told him that for a start, we're minding our own business, and we had a perfect right to be standing here. And he said, well, he needed to know what we were doing here, and he wasn't happy with us there. And he said, we weren't even on his property or looking at his property. So he went away. And he said, all of a sudden, within 10 minutes, the street just filled with racing cars, racing and tyres, squealing up to us, confronting us. And he said there's 3 or 4 or 5 officers standing on the footpath doing surveillance on this house. And he said, so we got in our cars and we drove away. And I said to him, what? You're the police and you buckled to these criminals? And he said, we feared mass violence.
Wow.
So to de-escalate it, we left the scene, and they shadowed us behind us. They shadowed us for miles and miles before they gave up the chase. He said, that's how far they'll go. That's pretty serious stuff.
Unbelievable.
No respect for the police whatsoever. And the other police that spoke to me were in my little port where we put our boats and whatnot, just a small place, talking to them one day about the Brethren. And he said, the best day on our beat is when the Brethren are on their interchange. I said, yeah, you got 20 cars, one in a row, and they're all drunk, aren't they? He said, you won't believe it. But he said, we can't work it out. And I don't understand this. He said, every time they blow into our mouthpiece, for a alcohol test, they wreck our analyzers, the little machine. They wreck
breathalyzer,
breathalyzer. They wreck it. He said, we don't know whether they're drinking lemon before they breathe into it, or a pill they take, or what. He said, we've even sent our breathalyzers back to the factory to get them analyzed to see what are they breathing into the breathalyzers that's wrecking them. And he said they can't even work it out in the production factory what they're blowing into them that's killing them.
Wow.
So he said never, ever trust an exclusive brethren. This is coming from the police. And I'm thinking, this is my hometown.
Yeah.
Some of these people are my own sister lives in this town. I never spoken to her except in the review for 40 years. This is what he's saying about my family. This is really bad. The other interesting one I had with the police was Sydney. And there was a case there, probably, 10 years ago, where they thought a woman reporter was taking photographs of their haul or something, so they chased her. And it got so bad, several cars, that she called out for help. And an opposition media company opened their road gates and let her into their yard to protect her. That's how bad it got. And I thought, I'd like to speak to the policeman who did that. Then I thought, hang on a minute, there's probably 500 police stations in Sydney. There's probably, 5,000, 8,000 policemen. They're only on for an 8-hour shift and then they're off. So you only get a third of those in a police station at any one time. And I thought, no, I don't normally give up easy. So no, I'm going to put a call through. So I went to directory. They gave me the number and they said, which police station do you want? I said, wouldn't have a clue. Just put me to a police station. So they just pressed a button. I got a police station, told them the case. I want to speak to a constable. And would you believe it? He said, I'm the man who controls it. You wouldn't believe it. Out of thousands of policemen and hundreds of police stations, I got the guy who handled it on the first call.
Oh, I love it. Wow.
I couldn't buy. I was speechless because I thought I'd have to go through half a dozen toll calls to Sydney and try and work through it. And maybe a month before I got the guy, and there he was. And then I thought, he's not going to tell me anything. I could have been a spy for the exclusive brethren trying to sort him out. So I thought, how can I give him confidence in me? So told him who I was. I told him that I'd written those 900 homes and 600 homes. Told him I was working not against the brethren, but to try and enlighten them or whatever. And that's the reason for my call, because I'd like to discuss them too, because my family are in there. And he opened up and told me the lot. I couldn't believe it. I still could have been a spy. So I think he actually went beyond what his trade would have advised him to do. So he set the whole case out for me. He said, when we caught these cars, he said they all had mobile phones and they were all totally wrecked beyond recognition or beyond getting anything off them. They'd all wrecked their mobile phones, crushed them. They all had radio contact installed within the car so they could talk to each other. And when we took them in for a briefing, they pulled out a paper bag and 12,000 Australian dollars rolled out onto the table. And he said, do you think we'll see that again? And he said that piece of speech is done in a way that we cannot go them for bribery. Will I see that money again? You see, they hadn't offered it. And then he said we went to the other two cars and they had a paper bag in each with 12,000 Australian dollars ready to bribe the police with whenever they got caught. Now, that came straight from the police officer that handled the case.
Unbelievable.
It is really. It's mafia.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I read the story of your other business partner from England that's on the podcast with you, Richard. Yeah. Richard. When I heard the case through that private investigator, which was an amazing podcast of how he'd been tracked and how he was to be done away with and other things, I related myself back to these things that I'd found out where I reckon they were in the mafia too. So I was able to believe what they said on that podcast without questioning how bad this thing is. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's actually it's from a UBT seminar, and I'll insert it here, where Bruce actually refers to them as a mafia. I don't have it on me right now, but I will insert it in here. And
okay.
It is. They definitely run themselves like a mafia. They are ruthless, absolutely ruthless.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's their way or the highway, and they don't care how they get their way.
Correct.
And I've said this to my lead investigator and to my case myself, is that they don't care. They all lie for each other. Their whole job is to protect themselves, their ecosystem, their truth, whatever it is that they believe, they all protect it. And that includes lying on the stand. That includes lying to police. I know when these police end up showing up in Maple Creek, or, I don't expect any of them to tell the truth. I mean, I would hope that my parents' love for me would outweigh their love for the assembly and what they're in, but I don't hold my breath on it.
No. And I think that side of it has gone too far to recover.
Exactly.
I think it's a start again from the beginning, prior to 59, and build it up as a bona fide church. It's got no mandate to be a church, none whatsoever. And that's why I've pled with the Royal Commission. You've got to take their charitable status off them so that it breaks them. And I said, if you did that, our families would be rejoined again.
Exactly.
I said, if you did that, I said it would be the greatest thing that's ever happened for 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Because where there's no gospel, and I put it in a book in writing, Bruce Hales is probably leading 40,000 people towards the gates of hell.
Yeah, I agree.
And I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
Because people have been asked, friends of mine have asked young people about their confession of faith and a born-again experience like I had. I can remember where I was, what the room looked like, what the tree was like outside. That's just in my vision from 70 years ago, as if it was yesterday. Mm-hmm. I had an experience, and I never give up on it. But you talk to them and they say, well, no, being a member of the Exclusive Brethren, we've got life eternal. No, I'm sorry, you have not.
It doesn't come like that, yeah.
You're going the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree.
The McCallum attack, it was a very vicious attack on Peter Harrison and me. And we had to work our way through it because they wanted to get their hands on the women who'd been abused. Mm-hmm. And I'd followed other cases and saw what they did. And he would get their hands on them. They would pay them money, or they would terrify them for what they were going to have to face in a court case so that they stopped complaining. Very much like some of the podcasts you've done. Mm-hmm. They start blaming the victim. And he so desperately wanted the 4 names out of me for the Petrie case. The Bruce Hale sent him over from Sydney to have a meeting with me. And I got on the ferry and went to the next city in the other island and had a meeting with him. And I wouldn't give him the information that he wanted. And he said, well, I haven't come all the way here from Australia. He said to go home with nothing. And I said, well, we'll give you what we want to give you because you're not getting the names of the 4 women. And then I thought I'd test him out. And he was getting madder and madder. So I said, well, what we'll do is, I think I might have touched it earlier. I said, if you will allow us, and I'll put this to the women, I think they would agree, I will bring them to the meeting in Nelson, which is a neighbouring city to us here. I will bring the 4 women, get the brethren to put on an assembly meeting with the culprit in the room.
Oh.
And if he will apologise to those 4 women in a meeting with all the brethren there, not just the priests, this confession has got to be carried by all the brethren, not just the priests.
Yeah.
So I will bring them. I'll come in with them. I'll be in the meeting too. And we'll listen to the culprit go over his history with these 4 women and apologise, and they will forgive him. There will be no court case. I can see him now. He was so mad because he realised he was between a rock and a hard place. I'd offered the names. I'd offered to bring the woman. He couldn't have asked for anything more than that, but he had to get agreement from the brethren in Nelson, which could have shot him down. And he I don't know whether you know him, but he was a huge guy. He was like 6'3", 24 stone or something. He was absolutely massive. And he jumped up. He was so mad, he jumped up out of his chair and shot the chair back with the back of his legs and went across the conference room. It literally went 2 meters out the back behind. He got up. He was so mad. But he realised I'd offered him something that now he had to decide whether he would accept it or not. So he gets on the phone and he rings McNaughton in Sydney, who was about the next under Hales at the time. And I'm listening to the conversation. And he comes off the phone and said, we've agreed to it. McNaughton's agreed to it. I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. I'm back in the meeting again. And the girls, honestly, the women would have rather have had a confession than go to court. They told me that. They would accept that if only he would apologise.
Wow.
But the fact he's saying he never did it, we're going to court. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, well, you ring the Nelson Brethren then, and you get the okay to put on an assembly meeting with all the brethren. I'll get the women together and we'll come and have a chat. And he came back and said the Nelson Brethren wouldn't agree. And that's what I pinged on that guy Smith that I chased out of the courtroom when I stopped him, when he was running into the car park. I said, Bruce Hales is going to withdraw from you. Then when he wheeled around and said, whoa, what for? I said, because you disagreed to me bringing the women into your locality, and that's why we're in a court here today, because you withstood McCorkle and McNaughton, which means you withstood Bruce Hales.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether he did or not, but it scared the daylights out of him anyway. So that's how that ended. And then afterwards, primetime TV for the next 3 nights, 2 nights or 3 nights, was all on the McCorkle covering up child sex cases. And the brethren turned round and blamed me. And I said, I didn't call the media. And when I walked out of that meeting with McCorkle and went into the foyer to leave, I ran into the TV that had done our documentary. And I said hello to them all because I knew them. And I thought, McCorkle's got the media here right on top of this meeting with me. And what he'd done, he'd got the media to come in for primetime TV to offset what I was saying to him about the 4 women so he could get it out into the public immediately.
Wow.
And I got a ring from an old man who I knew well, who was friends with my father, who I respected, and he phoned me. He said, Neville, what did you call the media in for? To hang one on the brethren. I said, I didn't do it. He said, well, who did it? I said, you're Bruce Hales, damage control officer. He did it. The very person we were talking to, trying to solve the problem, he had the media waiting in the foyer when I walked out. I'd never spoken to the media.
Did he believe you?
So I said, your man got it on primetime TV. I didn't. And all he said was, those leaders, no, my leaders have lied to me and I'm not happy about this. I said, George, you imagine if everybody said that.
Yeah.
I said, you pull the brethren straight.
Right. So there is what people need to do in the heat of moments, right? Is stand up.
Correct. That's what he could have done. And he could have gone back, but he would have got withdrawn from. He would have lost his family. He would have supported himself. Yeah. So, so that was had a very interesting end to it. The end was it had to go to court, and he went to jail for 2 years. But it had a pretty rough ride to get there. But we won.
Yeah, and I'll attach. I think there's a lot of articles to that. I'll attach all the articles in this podcast towards that case.
Yes.
I'll find them. I've got
pages and pages on the McCorkle thing. I just sent you one letter so that you had something about McCorkle.
Yeah.
And then he turned on me and said a whole lot of slanderous things about me. So I threatened him with defamation. Sent him a letter, got my letter to write to him and threatened him with defamation and bring him to a New Zealand court. I never heard another nasty word, so he took that seriously. So fun and games. So just on the last topic here, the contacts that I've had with members of the Brethren, we've had meetings in my lounge, of course, which didn't come to anything, but very respectful meetings. I will never argue. I'll never, ever argue, ever, no matter what anybody says to me. I will never argue. because you lose your position, you lose power when you argue. So I never argue with the brethren. But I had one person wanted to come and see me and tell me some things inside, and he came, and it was in Nelson. So I took him to another fruit grower's place who I knew the person on neutral ground where no EBs would be, and parked his car in there. And I had about an hour with him, but all the time, honestly, within every half a minute, he'd be looking at me and talking to me, and then he'd look out like that. Mm-hmm. And that was the road where an EB vehicle might have come up the driveway or something. And that's why he was just petrified the whole time that he would get caught. Mm-hmm. Not going to mention his name because he's still in there, of course.
Yeah.
And then that other person who spoke to me, the older man, and then I met another person. This is quite an interesting one. When we had the review, I got asked around, Pip and I got invited round to my sister's place to meet them for the first time in the review, which was after 20 years, was quite a thing. And we get in there, and their daughters-in-laws and husbands were there. So we met those who had married my nephews, and got on with them well. And my son and his family were with us to meet his auntie. And when we went home, we spoke to my daughter-in-law and said, well, what do you think about that, going to an exclusive home for an hour and chatting and whatnot? And the servery, about that length of the servery was just covered with bottles of spirits, like whiskey and everything. There was just top shelf stuff there, and a lot of little babies and kids running around. And she said, well, I think I'll join. We said, you what? She said, well, if all you do is drink whiskey and make babies, she said, I'm in. Anyway, we had to talk to them. Several years later, I was away out on an outlying island off the South Island building a jetty. And I had my boat that had my name on it down the side. And I saw this helicopter come in and 3 or 4 guys get out of it. And one, after a while, walked down where I was working along the beach. And I went to go in there with the boat to pick up something. And as I got closer and closer, and I was 5 or 6 meters away, I thought, I reckon I've seen that guy before. White shirt, black trousers, that tells you, doesn't it? And I thought, I reckon I've met this guy before. And as my boat hit the beach and stopped, I saw him lean out to the side and read the signage, my business signage on the side of the boat. And it had N and D McCallum, with my son's Duncan. And he looked up at me, and I looked up at him, and his jaw dropped a bit, and he was just eyeballing me at about 4 meters. I thought, well, I'll go and have a chat with him. So we got off, and of course, being away out on an outlying island, no brethren can ever catch you.
Yeah.
So he opened up. This proves it's wrong. You should be able to do this in the brethren, not only outside of the brethren. And he said to me, you were on medication once for muscle relaxant. It was when I had this pinched nerve trying to relax the muscles. And he said it helped your headaches. I said, yeah. I said, quite a while back, but yep. He said, would you mind telling me what it was? I thought, that's a weird question to ask way out on an outlying island. I thought, no, I'm going to dig a bit deeper here. And I said, well, what do you want it for? I thought, just started down the rabbit hole. What do you want it for? And he said, well, it's for my wife, who was my niece. And she gets really, really bad headaches. And I often wondered if we could get on to the tablets you were on, it might help her. And I thought, no, we just need to go down the rabbit hole a bit further. So I said, well, the first thing you do is you don't take drugs. You find out what's doing it, and you work from there back to the drugs. So I said, tell me what's causing it. And I couldn't believe what he said. Oh, he said, it's these jolly breaks when 20 people walk in and she's got to do all the meals and the catering. And he just flew off about the breaks. I said, well, you know where you start? You don't have any more visitors. That's where you start. And if that doesn't work, then you go on to the medication. So I said, you've got to go to the root cause first. And so I did. I had to go back to my doctor, go back through my history to find out what the tablet was. So I went to a wee bit of trouble for him. And I said, give me a guarantee that if I tell you what this is, you will always promise to ring me back and tell me whether it helped my niece.
Aww.
And he said, yes, I will. So I gave him the prescription. He's never, ever, ever rung me back.
Oh,
now that's dirty business.
Yeah,
it's really dirty business.
That's sad.
Yeah, but I thought my advice to him was correct. Stop the brakes.
Yeah, those poor women and what they go through, now, like these last, 5-10 years, it's just ridiculous because it's not. Back when I was in, right, it wasn't this massive, it's like the king and queen are coming every Sunday, right? It's what the displays they put on now. I've seen pictures of them are just crazy, so outlandish.
Yes.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for all those females in there.
And it's big cost too.
Such a big cost, yeah.
Yeah. We went to a break in the neighbouring place where we went every week, and a pretty arrogant brother there that tried to get into the hierarchy, and he couldn't, so he still sort of wanted to throw his weight around. And I was on this medication for my neck before my fusion, and I wasn't supposed to drink alcohol. Came to the break, and there were probably 15 or more people in the room, and he went round everybody, and then he came to me, and I thought, now what am I going to do? And he said, oh, whiskey on the rocks for you, Nev? I said, no. Milk to tea ratio. Whiskey on the bottom, lemonade on the top. And I didn't tell him it was for the medication because I was against the drinking anyway, and most people knew it. So I was taking a hang of a risk to say that. And he looked at me and he said, if you can't take it on the rocks, you're not a man.
Wow.
And he just went glug, 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 filled my glass up and had the arrogance to walk across the room in front of 20 people and drop it on my chair. And I thought, no, I'll be a bigger bully than him. So I got up in front of everybody. I walked back over to his cocktail cabinet. I put it back on the cocktail cabinet, got another glass, put that much whiskey in the bottom of it, put some ice in it, filled it up with lemonade, and went and sat down and folded my arms as if to say, righto, well, let's have it out with you.
Yeah.
Never said a word, and I got away with it. I expected a Priestley when I got home. And he took it and said nothing. So that's what you had to do. If I tried to negotiate and say, no, look, I can't drink this, it would have all started again,
Yeah.
So it's better just to walk up, dump it, get another one and go back, and it worked. So the drinking thing was quite an issue for me. I was really against it. I had one more visit, I won't say which locality, where I heard a friend of mine, an old motorbike and hunting pal of mine, had become a leader. I thought, oh, well, people like me can become leaders, can they? I'd like to have a chat with my old friend. This is 30 years after we'd been withdrawn from. So I got in my car and I drove to that city in the South Island. I knew brethren lived in the street, so I parked my car way out, put on a funny hat. I walked into the street and I watched the brethren come home from the meeting, so I knew which houses that were within eyeball sight of him were exclusive brethren. And then I waited for another hour or more, hour and a half in the street until most of the lights went out, which meant they'd gone to bed. And then I felt it was safe to go into my friend's house because fortunately his light hadn't gone out. So I went to the front door, knocked on it, met him for the first time in 30 years, and he's a leader. Told him what I'd come for, told him I wasn't against him. He would have got some of those letters that I sent out anyway. Yeah. And at the end of the conversation, I'll just touch on one thing. At the end of the conversation, he said to me, this is how honest he was, but took a massive risk. He said, we have done so much damage in this country. We will never, ever be able to put it right. And he said, I feel we will probably need to come to you people on the outside for help. You just have a think about that out of a leader's mouth. I could have rung up another leader in that city and potted him, and he would have been withdrawn from within a week. So that's how much he trusted me after 30 years, that he would actually make that final comment that we will need to come back to you out for help. So it shows what some of the mindset is in there.
Yeah.
It's not what it looks on the outside. I think there is something there that we could appeal to if only they would sit down and say, let's wipe the slate clean and let's have a chat. And that's what I've put in my letter to the local brethren here that are going to get it this week. Why don't we do what Scripture says and sit down and reason together and search the Scriptures to see if these things are so. That's in the letter.
It's just like, for me, I do not hate these people. It's just like, let's gather our compassion for everybody in the situation that we're in. I mean, we're going back how many years, right? We're going back what did you say? 59 separation was brought in, right? Do you think of how many years that we have been dealing with this cultivated soup of power and greed and money, that there is not one person to blame, right? Let's take blame aside, put that aside, because I really feel that that's what they feel all of us opposers are doing. I don't blame anybody, but what I want is to me, there is a way out of this. There is a way through this, but the more that Bruce resists and the more that people can't, I'm very inspired by the backbone that you've had. And I'm hoping a ton of these people that have one foot in and one foot out feel this backbone that you're presenting here, that it is okay to say no to certain things. It is okay to stand up to certain people, because it doesn't come out of malice. This is all coming out. If we all come from a place of compassion, things can change. The one preaching and I've said this in other podcasts, the one preaching my dad gave that I'll never forget. He actually got into trouble for it. Was he gave this preaching about compassion, and he was in tears in it. I will never forget it, because if Bruce was truly this full-fledged Christian soldier, I'm not going to call him a man of God because I can't. If he truly was this walking breath of Christianity, he would not be doing what he's doing. He would not be closing a blind eye to 96 podcasts of heartache. He just wouldn't. I guess like those are the things that keep me up at night. It's why I cry. Like I am a crier. Most people who know me know that. And that's what I cry for. I cry because this could be so easily addressed.
Yep.
And it just breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to know that there was a moment in time way back when that was not looked at and another path was taken, which has led us to the mess that we're in now. And I believe that we're at a crucial, pivotal moment. I believe Bruce Hales is sitting at a crossroads where he has the opportunity to create change or to create disaster. And from what I feel and what we're seeing from inside there, he is choosing the path of disaster. So this does not come on any of us who are choosing to speak the truth. This lands on Bruce Hales's lap because he is the one that is choosing to hold this power. He is the one that's saying he has this power, yet he is choosing a path of destruction.
Yep. I go back to the basics, like you're saying, and I grieve over the fact that I was in there when the Lord was head of the assembly.
Yeah.
Now I don't believe he's there.
No, not at all. It's not. No.
He can be with individual souls, but corporally or in an assembly situation, he's not there anymore.
No.
But he used to be. And that's a grief for any Christian.
And I plead to those people inside that know that it's not right, that if you are fearful of churches out here I guarantee you, you will find what matches you. I guarantee it. Absolutely. You have hundreds to choose from. You will find what you're looking for. But what you're looking for does not exist inside the PBC.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
We had a visit here from somebody in the North Island, brought here and hid his car. He wanted to see me for a while. And he said that he told me how he was converted, and he was a leader in a small locality in the North Island. And he was asked to give a word. I won't say where because I don't want them to trace him, but he gave a word at the end of 3-day meetings, which is quite an honour. And he said, we need to have more meetings about Jesus. He was visited within 2 days with priests taking him to task over what he had said. And he said, I pled with them, but it just fell on deaf ears. So he said, I conveyed to him how I'd been converted, and he told me. And he said, I might as well have told them I'd been for a ride on a horse. They take absolutely no interest in it. They did not know what I was talking about. And he said, I suddenly realized that virtually all my friends that I work with in my locality at the priest level are not saved souls. And he said, I've never got over it. So,
God, it's so hard when we know we have family in there, right? Like my family are good people. My dad is such a heartfelt man. My mom is so caring. And I think that's why I do what I do. I will not stop. I won't stop until I know I can't do anymore. I won't. And so I'm like very grateful to have reached out to you, and you have reached out to me to be able to sit in front of yourself, who has started this how many years ago. And I feel like we just are riding in on those flames that you started. Jill Mitten had started, like your generation that tried this so many years ago, right? Where social media is on our side this time. I do believe social media has really been able to be the reason why we have been able to do what we do now.
Yes.
But I am very grateful to hear and learn of all the work that you have done.
Yeah.
Thank you so, so much, Neville, for
glad to support
with
you.
us and just enlightening us all with what really went on all those years ago and all the work you have done. I am so, my bucket is so full tonight. It's so full. I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for supporting it.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Until next time, everyone, take care. Much love to everyone. Bye-bye.
How can you support Get a Life podcast? You can donate internationally via PayPal at www.paypal.me/Get a Life podcast. PayPal also has a QR code that can be scanned. Or donate to our Get a Life podcast GoFundMe. If you're in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Check out www.get-a-life.net for Get a Life merchandise, books, and ways to support or get support. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.